don't give up their light, using every last breath, escaping the long way down.
The Earth. Our planet is a strange and ever-evolving landscape of beauty and wonder. Millions of years have shaped the way our planet looks, smells, feels, and kills. In recent times, we have seen a change. Evolution has made way for a new form of life on Earth that affects all. And for better or worse, this change seems to be permanent. Creatures made of meat roam our planet, with an unknown goal for humanity. Some are harmless, others not so much. People are turning up dead, cover-ups are being made, and we have no power to change the will of evolution. Or do we? This is the plot of Vita Carnis. Birthed by talented Instagram artist Darian Quilloy, Vita Carnis follows the many events that take place on Earth after a new species of creature is discovered. Seemingly popping up from out of nowhere, these creatures have a diverse array of abilities and species. Some can be tamed, while others have been listed as the most efficient hunters in the Earth's ecosystem. The series educates us about these creatures and shows us what they are capable of through a number of engaging and well-made analog horror videos. Held in extremely high regard, Vita Carnis has intrigued millions of viewers, and with the hype of Season 2 releasing at the time of this video, I figured it would be a great idea to go through the first season of Vita Carnis to see what we can find, so we can better understand the story and where it might be headed moving forward. Wasting no more time, this is Vita Carnis, the story so far. The first tape of the series was uploaded on April 23rd of 2022. And is the first in a series of informational-style videos that would later go on to be edited into one long documentary detailing the various species of the Vita Carnis. For simplicity's sake, I will be following the fully edited version of these tapes, which runs about half an hour. We have a lot of ground to cover, so buckle in and try to keep up. The documentary, put together by an organization known as National Living Meat Research, or the NLMR, starts by telling us that recently Earth has experienced a change in its ecosystem and has given way to new forms of life. This new form of life is known as the Vita Carnis, which I believe to be Latin for living meat. We are told that these new life forms experienced an explosion in numbers starting all the way back in the 1930s. Since then, many theories have cropped up about where these life forms could have come from. Some say they are extraterrestrials, while others say that they are demons from hell who have come up to purge humanity. But from what scientists have found over the years, it would seem that the origins of the Vita Carnis only tie back to Earth, and they seem to have popped up from out of nowhere, for a reason that is unknown to us at this time. But they are not going anywhere anytime soon, so the best thing for humanity to do is to learn more about these creatures in order to coexist to the best of our abilities, which, as you will see later on, is much easier said than done. So let's go through some of the facts that are laid out for us by our narrator. The creatures are constructed mainly of muscle, organs, and bone structures. This gives them the unsettling look that resembles mammals, but without skin. This look is how they earn the name Vita Carnis. We learn that most of the species' diets consist of decaying organic material and other animals, excluding the Vita Carnis species. And they only appear in areas where there is an abundance of a plant-like structure the narrator dubs as the crawl, which leads us straight into the different species of the Vita Carnis. In total, we learn that there are 8 species of Vita Carnis that have been documented throughout the years. Let's go through them one by one. Starting off with the first evolution of the Vita Carnis, known as the crawl, Scandir Carnis. The crawl closely resembles the small intestine, with a structure that is made up solely of meaty tendrils that grow in a fashion similar to that of plant life, such as vines, mold, or fungi. Within each tendril of the crawl lies tubes the narrator dubs as veins and arteries, which are used to transfer nutrients throughout the crawl's body. Using its tendrils, the crawl can effectively gain and process these nutrients into usable energy. And with the dark pigmentation on the ends of the crawl's tendrils, it can also absorb sunlight, effectively creating a process of photosynthesis to create energy as well. We are then told that the crawl is heavily abundant and thrives all across the globe as shown by this map. One little detail I noticed right off the bat while watching this video is that there seems to be a black spot in South America that disappears after a quick second. Now this could be something as simple as an editing error, but it still seems odd. To remove a whole chunk of South America seems more intentional to me, and I'm not the only one who has noticed this detail either. I don't have a particularly strong theory for what it could mean, besides the obvious being that the whole region was wiped out and devoured by the Vita Carnis, but at the moment we still don't have any solid information about this. Maybe it will come up in Season 2. Moving on, we are told that while the crawl is almost overly abundant, its life cycle has actually caused other forms of life to flourish. But it is not just plants and animals that seem to thrive from the crawl. Humanity has also started using the crawl to our advantage. At least that is what we are told before we get the flash of a newspaper article that seems to detail the story of a radio tower that has been overgrown with crawl. This being shown to us right after being told that humanity has benefited from the crawl makes me think that the documentary could possibly be lying to us. And the incident seems strange, at least to me. Sure, plant overgrowth happens all the time, but the fact that the overgrowth took place at a radio tower seems a little bit sketchy to me for some reason. Could it have possibly been intentional? A strategy to cut off communications? I might be thinking about it a little bit too much, but I had to throw the thought out there. Anyways, we learn that the crawl can be harvested and it is cultivated in farms across the world. But due to its strange taste and unappealing visuals, the crawl has not been properly adopted into the food world yet. Perhaps the most important detail we learn about the crawl is that it has the ability to create new evolved species of Vita Carnis. Once the crawl has enough energy, a meat-like node will appear on its tendrils. This node will fall off to create an entirely new organism. This leads us to our second Vita Carnis species, known as the trimming, Ignavus Carnis. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice a quick flash of information given in the form of a storybook page as this segment ends. These storybook pages appear throughout the series regularly and have confused many on how they relate to the plot. But I have a pretty good theory about what they could mean. The first page reads as follows. Once upon a time, there was a distant kingdom. The kingdom was
so powerful and it needs so many money.
The royal family were magical.
So much magic.
They traveled land and sea to discover new places and learn what
Light beyond the void, light beyond the void.
So the first page is pretty hard to make out completely, but from what we can gather, it begins by telling the story of a distant kingdom, ruled over by a royal family who have magical abilities. They travel the world in search of something that is redacted from us. I'm going to leave the meaning of these pages ambiguous for now, as there are still many of them that we have to go through, and I feel it would be best if I gave my explanation of them towards the end of the video when we get into some theories. Moving on, we begin learning about the trimmings. These little guys are small mammals that, as we are told, resemble skinned raccoons. Cute, right? They sport a plump body, round head, and a mouth that hangs agape. We are told that all trimmings have unique characteristics, such as the number of limbs they have, but all of their bodies are made of meat tissue. And as if they couldn't get any cuter, it turns out that they are no larger than a basketball, only measuring about 20 centimeters in length. Trimmings are omnivores and mostly scavenge for plants and decaying animal flesh. They are also very skittish apparently, never attacking humans outright but rather fleeing and screaming, much like cats or other small animals. Due to this, you would probably think that the population of trimmings is low, but as we see from a quick flash of yet another newspaper clipping, they appear to be thriving, with an article that details a mass trimming infestation gathered under a large satellite dish. It's not too bad of an event on its own, but I do question why the trimmings would choose a satellite dish. It just seems odd to me for some reason. Moving on, we are told that trimmings can be found where there are abundant numbers of crawl, and since the crawl can be found pretty much anywhere, trimmings can as well. They also grow at a very quick rate, with a short lifespan of only about 2 to 4 years. The narrator tells us that while trimmings are abundant, humanity has yet to find a way to implement them into society, and they are actually considered pests by most people. To be fair, if I saw this thing in my house, yeah, I'd probably shoot it, but some people have found ways to domesticate trimmings as well, keeping them as little pets. After we are told this, the documentary prepares to show us our next species, shown to be the meat snake, but not before we get another flash of the prince story. The page reads, "During the travels on one of their expeditions, a great storm struck. It was so powerful, it swayed the boat the royal family rowed and pushed the prince into the sea." It seems that the story will be following the prince and their travels. Not knowing what the prince represents in the story of Vita Carnis at this point is normal, so like I said before, I'm just going to keep moving on for now. The next species we get in the documentary is one of my personal favorites, the meat snake. Mutuary Carnis. Also, if I'm pronouncing these wrong, I'm so sorry. The meat snake is exactly what its name describes. It is a long, worm-like creature made from a variety of different meats, coated in a transparent membrane that acts as a nervous system that holds the body together and keeps the meat that makes up the body from decaying. Depending on how much the meat snake consumes, its size can vary. When it separates from the crawl, much like the trimming, it will only be a few centimeters. On average, the meat snake measures in at about 5 meters or 16 feet in length. To put it into perspective for you all, that's about the average length of a great white shark. So the meat snake ain't messing around. But as we are told by the narrator, in times of extreme amounts of death, such as war, plagues, and natural disasters, meat snakes can grow to become massive hulking creatures. As we can see in a quick news article flash, the largest meat snake ever recorded was found during the sweep of an underground tunnel after World War II, measuring in at 40 meters, or 130 feet in length. Also, the article doesn't tell us explicitly that this event took place after World War II, but a small year reading 1947 can be found on the article, which for those of you who don't know, is about 2 years after the war ended. It seems that the corpses gathered during the war were fed to the meat snake, but perhaps the most interesting bit of information we can find is a highlighted bit of text that reads nothing but 2 words: cult activity. Now this is interesting because it begs the question of who was feeding the meat snake during the war. Was it actually a faction of World War II getting rid of bodies? Or is this unknown cult the one who fed the meat snake in some kind of form of worship? It is hard to say, especially since we don't know the exact location the meat snake was found. All we are explicitly told is that it was found stuck inside of an underground railway. We don't have enough information yet, so let's keep on moving. We are told that the meat snake's diet consists entirely of dead animals. Much like an actual snake, it locates its food using its tongue to detect particles in the environment. Meat snakes swallow their prey whole, and as they digest their food, the meat and bones of the animal will be implemented into the meat snake's body, expanding their size. An eerie detail found about this creature is that during the process of digestion, the meat snake will extrude the unwanted parts of an animal, such as the hair, bones, and fingernails. During this excretion of the unwanted parts, the skull of the animal that has just been consumed can actually replace the meat snake's giving each meat snake a unique and disturbing look. During their varied lifespans, they can even replace these skulls with others that they consume. The only way a meat snake can die is through starvation, burning, or deconstruction of their membrane coating. It is also the only Vita Carnis species that is able to reproduce. You see, when a meat snake grows to a large size, it will split itself into two, creating another meat snake in the process. Meat snakes are slightly harder to come by, seeing as the temperatures need to be moderate. Not too hot, not too cold. We are also told that their population depends almost entirely on the amount of corpses available, and that where there is death, there are meat snakes. Humanity has found use for these creatures as waste bins for the dead, keeping them in butcher shops, zoos, and as we saw earlier, battlefields in war. They are also extremely tame unless you get in the way of their feeding process. Meat snakes are pretty cool, honestly. But the next creature on our list is arguably even cooler. Before we talk about them, let's analyze the next storybook page though. The next page reads, "After being stranded at sea, the young prince eventually was cast to an island. Injured, the prince stumbled his way to a nearby cave. The prince used what magic he could to put himself into a healing sleep." Man, I wish I had that kind of magic. Sleeping after watching all this creepy shit would be so much easier. Anyways, moving on to the next species, we have the poster child of the Vita Carnis series. This creature is known as the Mimic. Trucidatum Carnis. The Mimic has the scariest look out of any creature that we have seen so far, holding similarities to human anatomy. They clearly resemble humans without skin. They sport unnaturally long fingers, bulbous eyes, and an uncanny mouth that is held into the form of a wide smile that stretches across their face. The mouth contains many teeth that resemble incisors that are perfect for tearing through flesh and bone. It is after this, we are told the Mimic's diet is composed entirely of human flesh. Which means that they are often found around densely populated human areas. In the 3 stages of its life cycle, the Mimic first separates from the crawl, and almost resembles trimmings, although they are much skinnier and only have 4 legs. In the second stage, they grow into the form that is described previously. We get some photos of this type of Mimic, taken from people who have encountered them, and they are disturbing to say the least, with most Mimics being inside the homes of those who captured the photos. The Mimic's hunting style starts to develop in this stage of its life cycle as well. The Mimic will start by finding densely human-populated areas and will begin to do its best to blend into society and locate its victim, using clothing, mannequins, or furniture to conceal itself. Once the Mimic finds an acceptable target, the Mimic stalks them, learning their routine to find out when the person is most vulnerable. Of course, this is usually when the person is in bed asleep. Once the target is defenseless, the Mimic will sneak into the person's home or room and will effectively execute and consume the person on the spot. Once the Mimic is done feeding, it moves away from the populated area to digest its meal in peace. If the person in this scenario was awake, the Mimic also has the ability to use a variety of sounds to startle its victim, tricking them into cornering themselves. Once the person is cornered, the Mimic will move in to attack. We see this in the recording of an unknown victim. It is all pretty scary stuff, but the next evolution of the Mimic is even worse. In the 3rd stage of its life, the Mimic has 2 ways it can morph. If the Mimic has had a steady supply of food over the years, it will start to develop more human-like features, growing skin and hair, eventually looking nearly identical to a human being. The second type of morph a mimic can have is when it has had an overabundance of food. In this stage, the mimic grows into a larger, more evolved hunter, with different features to match. The humanoid features of the mimic fade away in this stage, as the lengths of its limbs grow, along with a dark, highly durable form of skin, and its face changes into a pale, almost skin-like mask. The teeth move to the back of the throat, leaving the mouth in the form of a toothless grin. These are known as the Elder Mimics, one of the most efficient hunters on the planet. Now, while these creatures are cool, they obviously pose a pretty huge threat to society. Lucky for us, the documentary has some instructions for surviving a mimic encounter if we were to ever come across one. We are told that if we are ever pursued by a mimic, we need to get ourselves into a position where we have a clear route of escape, as most of the time, mimics will not give chase if the target has a clear escape path. If we were to be cornered by a mimic, we are told to get into the fetal position, much like in a bear attack, protecting our vital organs and face. If we have a weapon on us, we are told to not use it, as mimics are pretty much indestructible, even when it comes to gunshots. So that's all pretty terrible, but it is just one thing that the people of this nightmarish reality have to live with. The next species introduced to us is called the Harvester, but not before another storybook page, of course. It reads, "But the prince's healing sleep was long. He slept for what seemed like forever. As he slept, the land around him changed and grew. It was unrecognizable from when he first arrived. But the sleep still needed time to heal the prince, much more time. But it kept the prince safe while he rested, guarding him from the elements as the land changed." The Harvester, or Congregator Carnis, is a large bulbous mass that sticks up out of the ground, with many meaty tendrils that spread around the bulb underneath the ground. These things can get very big, around 9 feet tall and 6 feet in diameter on average. However, the tendrils of the Harvester are by far the scariest part of this organism. They can extend far beyond the body, nearly up to 500 feet. Being a specialized form of the crawl, they act much like a plant with similarities to the Venus flytrap. The Harvester has 2 types of tendrils. The first type are large and are lined with spines that contain 2 types of venom. On one side of the tendril, the venom contained within the spines is similar to that of a neurotoxin, which can easily cause paralysis to the unsuspecting victim. The second injects an anticoagulant, which will prevent the victim's blood cells from clotting, causing them to bleed out from their wounds. Once the victim succumbs to blood loss, the second type of tendrils begin their work. Thin but sturdy, these branches will begin to force the now hopefully dead victim underground. Once underground, the corpse will be fed upon until there is nothing left but scraps, which will eventually turn into a rich form of soil, providing extensive plant growth around the bulb, which hides the tendrils even more and attracts more animals. A strange detail is that the Harvester is actually a pretty picky eater, only latching its tendrils onto larger prey, while letting smaller animals go. The running theory the documentary displays is that the Harvester is smart and actually lets smaller animals roam around in order to attract much larger predators that can easily be killed and provide more nutrients. Luckily, this extremely dangerous organism is rare, only populating the northern hemisphere. We are then told that if we are stung by a Harvester, there is nothing that can help us. Fatality is a 100% outcome. We then get a quick flash of an article that states a family was attacked by a Harvester while hiking, and mysteriously, the authorities will not handle the Harvester, only putting up warning signs for future hikers. Yeah, it seems pretty sketchy to me. After this, we are told that if we find ourselves in the middle of a Harvester ground, we should not panic, but instead throw objects to distract the tendrils while we calmly and slowly step away, and hopefully escape with our life. This leads us to the next species and another chapter in our story. Outside the cave, during a time of hardship, lived the island critters. The critters were struggling in this hard time. There was barely enough food to go around. They would go and gather whatever they could. The next species is known as the Host of Influence, Imperium Carnis. The Host is a very interesting creature. It sports a strange humanoid look with the lower half of its body composed of tendrils and meat tissue, extending into the ground, rooting it in place. The host head has a smooth surface where its face should be attached to the body by a neck made up of tendrils with a slit for feeding. Perhaps its most striking feature is the spines that extend from its back. These spines produce spores made inside the host's body that are fired into the air. As we are told, these spores are extremely hazardous, and after this we get two images. The first seems to be a red triangle on a black circle, possibly painted into a boulder. The second is of these two figures standing outside what appears to be a window. What this means is a little hard to tell at the current moment. However, the first thing that came to my mind while watching the series is that we have had the mention of cult activity with the introduction of the meat snake. This triangle could possibly be their insignia, and these two figures could be cult members as they look to be dressed in black robes. But, of course, this is just a theory at this time. Moving on, we are told exactly what the harvester spore can do, and it is not pretty. Due to the spore being extremely dangerous and the host only being found in North America, it has been nearly impossible to obtain information about them. At the time of this documentary, there only exists 2 photographs of the host. Much like the other dangerous species of Vita Carnis, getting up close to the host is pretty much a death sentence, as when it releases its spores, they can be carried for miles. If a person were to breathe in these spores, they would find their way into the person's brain and begin a dark process leading to their death. After 2 hours, small symptoms will start to show, and after about 7 hours of being infected, the person will then stop what they are doing and begin walking towards the host. The infected person will then kneel in front of the host, offer itself up, exposing its vital organs, and then the host will promptly kill and consume them, leaving the scraps behind. However, if the person is treated or restrained within 36 hours, the infection will go away, and the person can return back to their normal lives. If the host can't find victims, it can and will uproot itself to move to a new area. All this makes the host extremely dangerous and mysterious, but not as mysterious as our next species, known as the monoliths. Coilum Carnis. Our next storybook page reads, although one day the critters found the cave while searching for food, they found the prince in a trance, in his healing sleep. The critters were so awestruck and enchanted by the prince's magic. It should also be noted that during this storybook flash, we catch a glimpse of a red circle. This might not seem important, but I assure you it will be later on. Let's talk about the monoliths. We are told that these creatures showed up more recently, in June of 1972, which probably places the whole documentary somewhere in the 1970s or early 80s.
The monolith is a very new creature, only showing up in June of 1972, in the area of
The monolith's location is kept a secret from us, but if you look closely at the map, you can see a red dot pop up in Canada when the video glitches. This seems to suggest that the location of the monoliths is somewhere near Hudson Bay. Once again, much like the authorities not properly dealing with the harvester that killed a family, the location of the monoliths being kept a secret is extremely sketchy, and makes me think that the government or possibly the National Living Meat Research Organization knows more than they are letting on, and are actively hiding information from the people. What the tape does tell us about these creatures is that there is only 7 of them, all equally spaced out in a circle formation. We are told that this circle surrounds something, but of course the information is kept from us. The monoliths are huge, standing 130 meters in height. They seem to be made up of many different tendrils, which also root them into the ground. These strands end at the head, which is made up of a solid block of meat, which forms the shape of an upside-down triangle. For its arms, the creature has dozens of long, meaty tendrils that extend almost to the ground. We are told that the monoliths pretty much just stand there and do nothing, but as we are about to be told of an event in which the monoliths did do something, the information is once again hidden from us.
what the monoliths do is simply stand and do nothing. The only activity documented that the monoliths have done was in During this period, they were extremely aggressive. When the group of were making their way to the city, the monolith that they had passes roared a deep bellow and swung its appendages at the team, completely wiping them out. When military vehicles were dispatched, once they got close enough top the monolith, it roared another call, this time releasing an EMP blast, completely knocking the vehicles out in the vicinity. Finally, long-distance rockets were fired and struck the creature.
What we can make out is that during this unknown event, they were extremely aggressive. We are told that a group of people were making their way to the city, and as they were doing so, the monolith they were passing by roared and swung its appendages at the team, wiping them out. Who this team actually was is still unknown. After this event, we are told that the military began to dispatch vehicles to the area, but as they got close, the monolith roared once again and sent out an EMP blast, stopping all the vehicles in their tracks. After this, long-distance rockets were fired at the creature. These rockets damaged the monolith, but it quickly regenerated in a matter of moments, looking completely unscathed once again. The area these creatures inhabit has been fenced off and is restricted to all civilians, and since then, the monoliths have just stood there, completely silent. And finally, we have reached the final creature on this list, known as the
Singularity is an orb comprised of a dark-colored mineral with hints of luminous colors within its core. The singularity is estimated to be 1 meter in diameter. The orb has several unique qualities that are not well understood. The singularity typically can be found suspended in air by an unseen force. There are also a variety of reading that have been documented coming from the orb itself. Various things like magnetic fields, energy signatures, and other pattern-like signals released by the singularity. The population of these creatures is unknown. Almost all info about the singularity is hidden or confiscated by officials. We were only able to receive one classified document about the singularity being held by
marvelous and majestic world that exists today.
Who is this creature? Why are they here? Are they dangerous? A thought was brought up. What if the critters use the magic to help them? It may grow food or heal sickness. They continue to argue about the prince and his magic. In the end, the majority of the critters agreed that the prince was dangerous and should not be meddled with. The final creature is known as the Singularity, Virum Carnis. The Singularity is a mystery that still has yet to be solved. It resembles a red circle, much like the one we saw earlier, although the tape says that it is comprised of a dark mineral with luminous colors at its core. It is estimated to be 1 meter in diameter. It has several unique qualities that are not well understood. It is typically found suspended in the air by an unseen force. It also seems to give off strange signals, such as magnetic fields, energy signatures, and other pattern-like signals. Almost all information about the Singularity is hidden or confiscated by officials. The only form of information we have is that the Singularity is being held by an organization that is not known to us at this time. And this is where our first tape ends. Well, that was a lot to get through. This tape essentially gives us the groundwork for all the other tapes that are to come. We know about all the different species and what they do, but we still have many lingering questions. Like, what's up with the cult? Where do these creatures come from? What does the prince's tale actually mean? Is there something higher at play here? What is the government hiding from us? The only way to get our answers is to keep moving.
This could be the greatest discovery of the age.
The second video of the series is much more tame compared to the last and is also much shorter. We begin from the perspective of someone flipping through channels on their television, eventually ending on a cooking segment, in which we are given instructions on how to make a delicious crawl cheese penne. Before we get into that though, we do get a quick flash of a broadcast that displays a wanted poster. The individual on the poster is Vincent Barrar, and they are wanted by the CSIS for interprovincial travel and production of sensitive material. For those who don't know, the CSIS, or Canadian Security Intelligence Service, is a real organization that basically acts as the CIA, but for Canada. So it seems that this person has done some stuff that the CSIS is very unhappy with. Watching this series again for the writing purposes of this video, I only now realized that this person actually has a much larger role in the story. I can't get into it now, but when we get to the theory section of this video, I think you will begin to understand who this guy is and why he is so important. Moving on, we begin our cooking segment and it starts out simple enough. We are told that for this dish, we will need penne pasta, crawl, cheese, green onion, salt, Cajun spice, parsley, dill, garlic and pepper, and the most crucial ingredient of them all, the all-new flavor enhancer from a company known as Nutrier. We first begin by boiling our water and preparing the crawl. To do this, the video tells us to cut the crawl into a rough mince. And as we are being shown how to do this, we can hear some questionable sounds. Yum. After that is finished, we are shown how to prepare the other ingredients. Our dish is looking pretty good, but the most important ingredient still needs to be added.
At this point, finish preparing the dish with your flavor enhancer, but allow your dish to cool to a temperature below 60 degrees Celsius.
As the video tells us to add the flavor enhancer after the dish has cooled down a bit, the music playing in the background goes out of tune, and the flavor enhancer is added. This tells me that something probably isn't right about the flavor enhancer, and my suspicions are all but confirmed, as after the dish is shown off to us, we get an image that is hard to make out, but when we turn up the brightness, we can make out some information. The image appears to be a whiteboard with some notes and an image. The only notes that I can make out are this one on the top right of the board that seems to say Nutrier Co., and the one in the center that asks the question, who are they? This question is directed to a symbol that clearly resembles a red triangle in a black circle, the same symbol that can be found on the flavor enhancer, representing Nutrier Co. Right after this, we get another page in the prince's story. It reads, "Although the other critters ignored the rest of their fellow kind, instead, they secretly visited the slumbering visitor. They snuck what little food they had and carefully fed it to the prince, greatly hastening their recovery." And that is where our second video ends. I can appreciate how innocent this video is while giving us some interesting details that are going to set up events that are to come later on in the story. Mainly with Nutrier Co. As you will see later on, they have a lot more going on than simply being a seasoning and spice company. The next detail is the hint of a character named Vincent Barrar. Like I said, he will become important to a theory I have later on, so just be sure to keep him in mind for now. Keeping at a breakneck pace, let's go ahead and move on to our third video, a guide to owning a pet trimming. The third tape in the series is a guide on how to properly take care of our own pet trimming. As said in the first video, trimmings are extremely tame and skittish, making them an ideal pet, although they do require a fair bit of maintenance. The first thing the video tells us to watch for is the temperature of their environment. We are instructed to keep our home at room temperature, as trimmings find it most comfortable. The second thing we need to prepare for is the trimming's sleeping habits. Trimmings prefer to sleep in higher temperature environments, so simply using a box and a fair amount of blankets will be enough for our little guy to sleep comfortably. This leads us to the trimming's diet. Trimmings, much like dogs, are not picky eaters when it comes to what they consume, and they will eat just about anything that you give them. As long as the meals are high in protein and provided 2 times a day, the trimming should be good to go. The video makes sure to remind us that trimmings are also nocturnal and will make plenty of noise during the night.
To prevent you from having sleepless nights, try to give your trimmings first meal in the late morning or afternoon.
Okay, well that's creepy, but these little guys are so cute, so my sleep schedule can go to hell anyways. The video then educates us on what a trimming's exercise routine should be. Taking them on regular walks and giving them enough space to roam around is recommended, as well as access to the outdoors so that they can socialize with other trimmings. And apparently, even though trimmings are skittish, they are also extremely social creatures when they get to know you. So when it comes to keeping them entertained, simply talking to them is enough to keep them occupied. If you are busy and don't have time to talk, letting them listen to the radio or watch the TV will also work in keeping them entertained. Now, taking ourselves away from how cute these guys are, I do find it strange, however, that there seems to be a correlation with trimmings and communication devices. If you remember, we had the quick flash of a news article that detailed the story of a mass trimming gathering under a satellite dish. And from what we can see here, it looks like they also love listening to radio waves. This makes me think that there is possibly more going on with the trimmings than the series is letting on. Perhaps their cute and timid demeanor is just a front for more terrifying truths that we couldn't possibly be aware of. Aw, but he's dirty now, so we gotta clean him. We are told that when bathing a trimming, it is important to be gentle and make sure to dry them properly, keeping the soap out of their mouths and eyes. Soon after this, the TV playing the video shuts off, and we can hear someone writing in the background. After this, we get another storybook page. One day, the prince awoke suddenly. Thanks to the critter's assistance, the healing process had finished very quickly. The prince had fully recovered and was now fully awake and aware of their surroundings. Surprised by the prince's sudden awakening, the critters ducked and hid from the prince's sight. This video, once again, is much more innocent and had little in the way of scares, but it did hint at some darker revelations having to do with the trimmings. It appears that there is more going on with them than meets the eye, and despite them being harmless, they may have a purpose that we are unaware of at this time. My theory is that the trimmings could possibly be spies, seeing as how they love to listen to people talk and are attracted to communication devices. I think it is safe to say that their purpose in all of this is to learn what they can about humanity and communicate this knowledge with the other species of Vita Carnis, or possibly some other entity. I could be wrong since this is unconfirmed, but it is the only thing that makes sense at the current moment. So let's move on to our next video, the meat snake specimen archived footage. We start the video in darkness, and we hear someone inserting a tape into a VHS player. We are given a warning that distribution of this tape is an infringement upon the law, and that we should discard it immediately. Our nameless viewer keeps watching, however, and we see that what they are viewing is another documentary-style tape. The tape focuses on an event that took place in 1945, just after World War II had ended. This event took place during a routine sweep of an underground railway. The cleanup crew made the discovery of the largest meat snake ever recorded. If this sounds familiar, it should, seeing as how in the very first video of the series, we got a newspaper article that detailed the discovery of the largest meat snake on record, lodged in an underground railway tunnel. Although if you were paying attention, you will remember that that article was dated to be published in 1947, a whole 2 years after the war ended. And the actual lengths of the snakes don't match either, which means there could actually be 2 incidents of the cult feeding meat snakes until they grow to this humongous size. So while it may seem as though this tape was recounting the event listed in the article, it is actually a different discovery altogether. We are told that the entirety of the tunnel had been blocked off as a result of the meat snake's size, giving it the look of a large meaty wall with a mouth full of skulls in the center. Many strange anomalies were found with this meat snake, one of these anomalies being its color. While a normal meat snake will usually have the color of light red, this meat snake was a dark maroon color. The meat snake also seemed to lack basic motor functions, acting more as a plant than an actual animal, remaining completely stationary. This is probably because the meat snake was so incredibly big that it was impossible to unlodge itself from the tunnel, but it does beg the question, though, of how the hell did it get that big in the first place? Well, we know that meat snakes only eat corpses, and this is right after the time of World War II, the most devastating war in history in terms of the lives lost. But how did all of its food get into the tunnel?
So how did it get so large? The answer was discovered by a different cleaning crew, who found the other end of the tunnel. They followed it until it met with the other end of the meat snake. Alongside it was a huge pile of
It seems that within the tunnel, during the cleaning crew's search, they found that the other end of the tunnel was littered with a mountain of corpses. Pretty disturbing stuff, honestly. But this raises yet another question. How did such a staggering amount of corpses find their way into the tunnel? Well, once again, if you remember that newspaper clipping, you will also remember the brief mention of cult activity surrounding the meat snake. At this point, I'll let you know that there is certainly a cult subplot to Vita Carnis, and this is one of the earliest examples of people worshipping these creatures. This unknown cult probably found the meat snake, either down in the tunnels already or they brought it there themselves, and they began feeding it during the war while millions of people were dying, feeding it endlessly until it was eventually discovered. We will get some more of this cult later, but for now let's try to get through this video without getting ahead of ourselves. We are then told that while meat snakes usually have a pretty horrible smell, seeing as how they eat corpses, this meat snake actually smelled decently pleasant, like the cooking process of scrambled eggs. Pretty weird detail, but interesting nonetheless. A detail that is even more interesting, though, is that later on when the cleaning crew came back, it was discovered that the meat snake had simply vanished from the tunnel. And given its size, you can see why that is so strange. We don't get many details on this because it is mentioned very briefly, however. The gist of it, though, is that the meat snake vanished without a trace. After this, we get a flash of an unknown person. They seem to be a high-ranking official for the government or the military in some sort of way. But if you look closely, you can spot the Nutrier-Co triangle pinned onto their suit. This tells me that the origins of Nutrier go back even to the 1940s and possibly even earlier. This also tells us that they might hold much more power over the government than we first presumed. As the tape ends, we can make out the next chapter in the prince's story. One of the critters built up the courage to meet the now awake stranger. They crawled to the prince's side and extended their hand in friendship. The prince reached back, and together, they formed the bond that would change their fate. Buckle in, because I'll let you know right now, this is when the series starts to get good. Our next tape is the Mimic Defense Instructional. We start the video with an emergency alert system and a date. October 23rd, 1986. The video tells us that there has been a significant increase in missing persons and fatalities on a global scale, and that the main cause of this chaos is a significant growth in the mimic population. We also get a quick glimpse of a map clearly resembling Canada, as well as a note on the top right that says, "This video is being broadcast by the Canadian government." The narrator says that the tape we are about to see is an instructional recording released by national authorities to educate us on how to defend ourselves against a mimic attack. The video then goes on to recite most of the information we heard in the first video. This only begs the question of which video actually came first in our timeline. At the time of writing this, I assumed the full-length documentary to be the first video that was produced, seeing as how it talks about the Vita Carnis being a newer species, as well as going through each species individually. There's no clear answer to it, but I'll let you know right now, I think I was wrong. I believe that this broadcast in 1986 to be the earliest, and I will explain why at the end of this video. Moving back to the video, we get some more basic information about the mimic, like how it can contort its bodies in ways that allow them to hide in small spaces such as furniture, as if they weren't scary enough. We also get some visual representation of what a mimic would look like during the process of it becoming more and more human. As you can see, they look extremely uncanny, with wide smiles and bulging eyes. During a quick flash that gives us some more unnerving imagery of these human-like mimics, we get a strange word at the bottom of the screen that reads, abbreviatus, or abbreviatus. Now, plugging the word into Google, I found almost nothing, as it is uncommon. It is a Latin word that, when translated to English, means abbreviated. And while I am not quite sure what is being abbreviated here, I do have a theory for what the series could be getting at by showing us this. See, all the species of the Vita Carnis have Latin names given to them in the first documentary. Ignavis carnis refers to the trimming, and in English, it can be translated to the cowardly of the flesh. Imperium carnis refers to the host. When translated, it means the dominion of the flesh. Trucidatum carnis, referring to the mimic, can be translated to the slaughter of the flesh. So when we use this common thread of Latin names referring to the different species, abbreviatus carnis can be translated to abbreviated flesh. Now, why this stage of the mimic's life cycle could be called this, I am not too sure. It could represent how they look more human, but not exactly, but it's still difficult to say at this time. If you guys have any ideas, feel free to plug them into the comments below. Transitioning back into the video, we begin with some instructions on what to do if we are attacked by a mimic. Now, pay attention, because this is where details start to get important. The video starts by telling us that if we are faced with a mimic, we should make ourselves appear larger and make loud noises, much like we are told to do in a bear attack. If we are armed with a weapon, we are told to aim for the head or the legs. Fight back and don't let it get a hold of you. If we come across a mimic that is unaware of our location, we are told to stay still, so as to not alert it to our presence. But if it happens to see us, we need to run. Now, if you have been paying attention, you will have noticed that some things seem off. Going back once again to that first video we covered, you might remember the instructions being different than what they are here in this video. It's because they are. If a mimic sees us, do we quietly walk away, or do we make loud noises and make ourselves look bigger? Do we attack with a weapon? Or do we aim for the head or legs? Do we run? Or do we crawl into the fetal position and hope for the best? One of the tapes is lying to us, but at the current moment we can't be sure which one. I do have a theory for which one could be, but once again, I'm gonna have to cover that later once we get to our timeline. The informational video ends and we can hear someone ejecting and then loading a tape. We are told by some text that this is an evidence tape for the Christopher and Janice case of 1983. The tape then cuts to Blair Witch-style found footage of two people, of whom we can assume to be Christopher and Janice. They start by messing with the camera to see how it works, and then they begin walking to an unknown location, having some fun little banter along the way.
Too bad. You were the only person who could film with me, so you're gonna have to put up with it. Fine. Screw you. Screw you. Screw you.
Are you sure we should be out this late?
Fine. I'll cook you stuff when we get home. Don't worry.
I'm hungry.
Too bad.
The video takes place at night, which means this old 80s camera isn't really picking up the greatest picture. but it is picking up the conversation between the two people as they walk. Janice seems a bit unsure about this trek they are making, but Christopher reassures her that it will be done in no time. We learn through a quick camera mistake that I relate to all too much.
Wait. Ah, shit.
That the camera they are using will sometimes turn off and on randomly. Later, we can see that the pair have left the sidewalk and are now making their way through the woods, and through some dialogue we begin to understand what they are doing here. The pair are traveling to an area that was, recently, a crime scene. According to Christopher, a man was found brutalized inside of his trailer, and the authorities supposedly covered it up by removing the trailer and getting rid of all evidence dealing with the event. We get more information on this after the duo reach the site, though, as Christopher reads off a quick script to give us the rundown of what exactly happened. The segment is a little hard to make out, so I will go ahead and play it for you with subtitles now.
Okay. Year 1980, teenage boy was coming home from his trailer one late night. Although, when he arrived at home, he found a grisly scene. Detail Barar, his father that he came home to, was found dead. The grisly scene lies before him. Police were called, and they came to investigate. The strange thing, though, they immediately closed off everything. No one was allowed near, but only a few witnesses saw what truly happened there. For some reason, the police were acting very weird and trying to keep everyone away and telling little information. And when the information was released to the public, they say it was a suicide. Although, the trailer and most people living nearby moved away pretty much immediately. Police say it was a suicide, but the witnesses that did catch an eye of what happened say the scene was much too grisly to be that. But, police haven't come out about anything yet. So that's why I'm here, to answer what truly happened. And that's it for now.
You said grizzly way too much.
What?
You said grizzly way too much.
Too much?
Yeah.
Okay, shall I retry?
Sure.
So it appears that 3 years ago, a teenage boy came home to his trailer to find his father, whose first name I can't make out, but a last name I can clearly hear as Barar, dead and brutalized in his trailer. The police were called and the cause of death was ruled as a suicide, but witnesses said that the scene was much too grisly to be such a thing. I think we all know what actually happened. The running theory, just based on what this video surrounds, is that a mimic attacked this kid's father while he was in the trailer, and the authorities covered it up as best they could, seeing as how the government in this series seems extremely corrupt so far. After Christopher is done reading his lines, they both begin to make their way back to the house, as Christopher remarks that this would be the perfect time for a serial killer to jump out of the woods and grab them both, before he seemingly disappears.
Yeah, because, like, back there was the perfect time for a serial killer to just jump out and grab us, you know?
Cut it out. It's scary enough as is. Chris? 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 Where are you? Chris! Come on! This isn't funny!
Janice is put off by this for obvious reasons, but labels it as a prank and begins walking back to the house on her own. On her way back, she finds Chris, and a mimic devouring his body. The mimic gives chase and follows Janice all the way back to the house before killing her, in an off-screen death. After this, the tape is ejected and we can clearly hear someone take a breath, distressed by what they have just witnessed. Then our next storybook page is shown to us. The critters led the prince out of the cave and up to the top of a hill the prince had been buried under, and showed them the forest. This is our home, full of wonder and beauty, although the forest struggles to provide for all the critters, and we are facing disaster. Will you help us? And that is where this video ends. Okay, so we have some details we need to keep in mind moving forward. First, we now know that someone or an organization is actively lying to the people on how to defend themselves against these creatures, whether it's the National Living Meat Organization or whatever company produced the 1986 tape. We also learned that as of the time of 1986, mimic numbers have been increasing to a staggering amount, actually threatening humans in large populations. Christopher and Janice were two of these unlucky victims, as well as an unnamed father in the trailer. A small detail that I would like to mention about Janice's death is that I'm pretty sure it got hinted at all the way back in the first tape. If you'll remember, in the section that covered mimics, we got a quick video of someone hiding from a mimic in a closet. I believe that this person is Janice, as we can clearly tell by the breathing that this person is a woman, and they are also carrying a flashlight with the same kind of camera. I could be wrong about this, but I thought it was a cool connection to point out. As far as the 1980 trailer case goes, it seems like just another mimic attack
If it weren't for the father's last name, that being Barar.
the same last name of the man who was in the crawl cooking video on the wanted poster. So this begs the question, is Vincent the teenager who came to find his family dead, or is Vincent the father? The first name is extremely hard to make out, but I think we can assume that the teenager is Vincent, seeing as how his father died in 1980, and the photo that's on the wanted poster is taken from 1988, which means that he couldn't be the father, or else he would be dead. The pieces are beginning to fall into place as we head into our next tape, the Species Anomaly Report. This video begins with a warning, and I'm gonna be honest, it is completely justified. This is without a doubt the darkest and most disturbing episode of the series, so be sure to prepare yourself. After the warning, a computer is booted up. This computer seems to be used to document abnormalities in the Vita Carnis species. For this abnormality report, it seems that the harvester has been experiencing a growth in its population from the dates of August 1st, 1989 to October 1st, 1989. We then get a map of Canada showing the harvester's locations on August 1st, and then straight after this we are shown a photograph of a terrifying looking family, but a family nonetheless. We can then see some blurry footage of two people walking through the woods, as well as some harvester tendrils moving underground. We are shown the map of harvesters again. This time the date is September 1st, and we can easily notice the shift in the harvesters' locations. They seem to be moving north towards Hudson Bay, the theorized location of the monoliths. Again, right after the map, we see some more blurry footage taken in the woods, and then some harvester tendrils once again. The screen goes black, and we can hear someone walking through the woods, rustling the leaves as they move along. And then We can hear a child screaming as they are stung by the harvester. The screams continue as we get a gnarly shot of the child's body being digested underground. Once the skin is gone, the screams stop, and we can see that they have been sketched out of the photograph. We are shown the map once again on October 1st, and the harvesters have continued to move north, surrounding Hudson Bay. Presumably drawn in by the screams of her child, the mother tries to reach them, but she too is caught by the harvester. Both are now etched out of the family photo. The video ends with another print page. The prince stood back and spread his arms, and before him glue a bright light, mystical shapes and colors, lights and figures. The critters watched with wide eyes, such sublime brilliance. The prince completed his display. He vowed that with the power he held and the help of his kingdom, he shall heal their home. In the first video of the series, we are shown a newspaper clipping that covered a harvester's attack on some hikers, and how the authorities refused to do anything about it. I believe this footage to be the event the article was referring to. Harvesters have been making their way up to the bay for 3 months, and along the way, they have probably taken many victims with them. I believe the underground shots of the tendrils to be a visual representation of a harvester moving itself using those tendrils. The only question that remains is why they would move towards Hudson Bay. We have established that this is most likely the location of the monoliths, so it seems to me that the harvesters are moving into a defensive arrangement around the bay to keep out any threats for some unknown event that is about to go down. Another detail I will point out now, and get into later, is the family photograph. What I noticed is that the father in the photograph seems to have a slight resemblance to Vincent.
I will explain why I'm bringing this up later on in the video when we hit our timeline. Just keep in mind that this little detail is very important to a theory I have regarding the importance of this family.
For now, let's go ahead and move on to the final 4 tapes of the series. The next tape is a commercial for the flavor enhancer, featured in the Crawl cooking segment. We are shown the Nutrier logo once again, as well as a year, 1990, making this commercial the farthest point in the timeline so far. It seems that the high demand for the flavor enhancer has prompted Nutrier to make a new product, known as the Flavor Enhancer Deluxe. Containing a modified recipe in a much larger package, it is marketed to contain everything we need to get the best flavor out of our meals. The commercial shows us a graph which serves as a good visualizer to show just how well Nutrier is doing with their new product, and we learn that Nutrier was founded in mid-1990, making them a relatively new company. Since then, they have been extremely successful with their product, with high sales that only seem to be going up. The video then transitions to another commercial for the Flavor Enhancer Deluxe, but the narrator seems a bit less enthusiastic this time.
Enhancer to your dinner, making your food even better to enjoy. The Flavor Enhancer Deluxe, available on shelves now.
Flavor Enhancer Deluxe, now available in stores near you. Nutrier Co. Experience true save.
The video becomes more and more corrupted as it goes along, and it begins to tell us that we need the flavor enhancer and that we must consume it.
You need the flavor enhancer to enjoy eating. You need the flavor enhancer.
Consume.
You need it.
You must.
You must.
We see some hands reaching out towards the flavor enhancer as well as the new Trier logo before the video ends, and we get our final storybook page for the series. The prince gathered what he could and set sail onward. Once the prince returns home, they will come back to the island and return to the critters. And yeah, that is where our prince tale ends for now. They sail off with the new Trier logo on their flag, with the goal of saving the critters and their land. One thing that separates this video from the rest so far is that it actually contains a link to an unlisted video in its description. The video is called Uncovered Documents, and upon clicking on this video we are greeted with some cryptic imagery. The flavor enhancer, ants, an article for the flavor enhancer, ants, confidential information, ants, and a piece of an article that details a new Trier scandal. The article reads, New Trier Co. is facing charges after numerous reports of sickness after consumption of their product, the flavor enhancer. The only statements from the company so far are dismissing any issues and that their product is safe to consume. We then get some flashes of some unknown authority figures with the new Trier logo pinned on their uniforms, showing their reach and power once again. Then we get some odd imagery of some small organisms under a microscope, before we get the cool visual of an ant with a plant growing out of its skull, and an X-ray of the human brain. I believe that this serves as our explanation for what the flavor enhancer actually is and what it does to those who consume it. If you know anything about fungi and how they operate, you have probably heard of cordyceps. Cordyceps are a type of fungi that are known for infecting insects after they have died and controlling their bodies. A concept that The Last of Us would steal millions of years. I'm sorry. With all of the ants featured in this video and the microscope shots resembling cordyceps, I think it is safe to say that the flavor enhancer acts the same way, but with humans. After all, the commercial did tell us to keep the temperature of the flavor enhancer at 60 degrees Celsius, the same temperature in which cordyceps need to survive. This led me to believe that the flavor enhancer could possibly contain the spores of the host, seeing as how the symptoms seem to match up with those listed in the documentary. After this revelation, we are shown another article that details conflict dealing with an organization known as Carnis. The private organization of Containment and Research Consult Association Society, Carnis, has been experiencing backlash from government agencies about cooperation and violation of newly introduced policies of... So now we have another faction showing up in the series. We don't know what they are all about just yet, but we do know that they are opposing government agencies. Could these government agencies be New Trier? The video ends with someone typing on a computer, writing out a new log labeled as message to Carnis. Now, I know that we have a lot going on, and introducing a new group of people into the series might seem like jumping the gun, but trust me, it doesn't take long for us to find out who Carnis is and what they stand for. It is best that we keep moving on to the final 2 tapes of the series so that you can see for yourself. This video takes place on December 30th, 1990. We start with some visuals of the monoliths in a documentary-style video, before swiftly transitioning to the computer log from the previous video. And we get some audio of the message that was sent to Carnis.
You might be confused as to why you received this package. This was left to you because we share a common goal. I'm aware that you studied Carnis and researched their properties. I'm also aware that you have received backlash for doing so.
We see all of the previous pieces of evidence discovered in the previous tapes, laid out in their physical forms. The person speaking explains that they are sending this message to Carnis because they share a common goal, and are tired of nothing being done about the casualties suffered as a result of the Vita Carnis. The person recording says that all of the evidence they have gathered leads them to the island in Hudson Bay. but they don't have the power to make the change themselves, as they are just one person. This is where Carnis comes in.
They have slowly been numbing our minds to their schemes, but they've made one crucial error. Trails, crumbs, traces of information. I've collected these pieces and found their loose ends. This is why I've left this message to you. The documents included with the statement is all the information that I have gathered. Every continuity, every cover-up, every clue that I could find. They all lead here. Something has been going on these few years. Something big. Something they don't want us to know about. Which is where you come in. I don't have the power to change things, but you do. Alongside the documents are plans. Plans for a meeting, one of great importance. You have the resources. This information I have provided to you. I hope you can put a stop to all the scandals. I just hope it isn't too late.
The person recording states that along with all of the evidence they have gathered, they have included secret plans held by New Trier that lay out the details of a meeting that will be happening very soon on the Hudson Bay Island. With this information, Carnis will have what they need to stop New Trier for good and save the lives of possibly millions of people. The video ends with the sound of a page ripping, and we get an image of a lost piece of evidence, impossible to decipher. Going back through the video and actually looking at the physical evidence, we can get some new details that clear up some parts of the story for us. Let's move through it. First thing I notice is that we get references to many of the events that happen throughout the series. We see photos of Christopher and Janice Grady, as well as an article that details the case of a computer scientist found dead in their trailer after their son came home, and how authorities chalked it up to be a suicide. The mother and child who were killed by the harvester are linked to an article that details the aftermath and how authorities refused to get rid of it. One of the most interesting pieces of evidence details how a group of teenagers labeling themselves as the National Living Meat Research Organization were arrested for releasing the first Vita Carnis documentary, for the reason that it contained sensitive material and defamation. So the first video we covered was actually just a student's project, explaining why some of the information was wrong and why it was edited to have confidential evidence hidden into the frames. The students claim that they had no knowledge of this added material though, so maybe it wasn't them. The only question that remains is who is the person that has been gathering all of this evidence? The only option that makes sense to me at this time is Vincent. I believe that after his father died, and another event that I will get into, he decided to start looking into the Vita Carnis and how the government was handling them, making him a wanted man as seen in the cooking video. But with a problem the size of this scope, he needs some help. And that leads us to our final video, Facility 0. We start our final video with a mission briefing from Carnis. The objective of the mission is to infiltrate the restricted zone in which the monoliths reside and ambush a meeting that was brought up in the previous video.
3 ground teams are tasked with infiltrating a previously abandoned mall titled Facility 0, which is located in the restricted zone based on our info. The mission will take place in 3 stages: infiltration, encirclement, and ambush. Primary objective is to capture the facility and seize the items of interest for extraction.
While this briefing is being laid out for us, we see a New Trier file being opened. We can see a document detailing the Singularity inside. The Singularity has been a huge mystery to us ever since that first video, but we are given some details here. There are apparently several singularities spread out across the world in different continents. They are made up of an unidentified material and seem to emit strange energy signatures. As of the time of this document, Neutrier has collected 4 singularities and is investigating 3 more that were found in unspecified locations. Instructions in the document state that once all singularities have been brought to Facility 0, they will begin Phase 2 of their program. What this program consists of is a mystery to us at this time. The infiltration of the island commences as 3 teams of Carcass soldiers get into position. They neutralize a harvester to clear their path and begin moving towards the facility. As they move up, we get a glimpse at the monoliths and their sheer size. Being extremely careful, they manage to make it past the monolith, and they enter the facility. We then get some camera footage taken from inside the facility as the teams make their way through, taking out guards as they do. They make it to their objective unscathed. And these are the final images that we get for Vita Carnis.
Still to go. Preparing to breach.
Breach in 3, 2, 1. Breach.
Get down! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Get down! Put your hands up! Get down! Get down!
This meeting looks like some kind of ritual, and it also looks like Neutrier found the other 3 singularities, because from what we can make out here, there is 7 in total. What this ritual actually is still unknown, if you can believe it. At the end of the video, the soldiers seem to gun down the cult members, and this is where Vita Carnis Season 1 ends. This video was awesome, honestly. Giving credit where credit is due, seeing the progress of each video in the series culminating in a very well animated, intensely paced finale was honestly super impressive. The video didn't give us many new details as far as the overall mystery goes, but it did leave us with one hell of a cliffhanger. But in order to properly digest what is to come in Season 2, I believe it is essential that we put together a timeline of events for the series so far, to make sure that we are not missing anything, of course. So, without further procrastination, let's go ahead and start dissecting the timeline of Vita Carnis. The first thing I would like to talk about is the Prince story, because I feel what it represents for the larger story of Vita Carnis is extremely important. So let's first summarize the Prince's tale. We start the story in a faraway kingdom ruled over by a king and a queen, possessing magical powers. On one of their voyages across the sea, their son, the prince, is knocked off the boat and swept into the sea, eventually landing on an island. In order to heal himself and regain energy, he finds a cave, and goes into a deep healing sleep, using his magic to do so. The island inhabitants, known as the Critters, stumble upon the prince in the cave while searching for food. At first they are unsure what to do with the prince, but eventually some begin sneaking food into the cave to help the prince recover. They do this because they are going through what the book describes as a time of hardship, and they believe that the prince's magic will be able to help them. One day, the prince awakes, fully healed from their injuries, and they extend their hand in friendship to the Critters, who show the prince their world, eventually convincing him to help them. The prince sails off to find his parents so that they can return to the island and one day help the critters. And that is where the prince's tale would have ended if it hadn't been for the fact that while I was editing this video, I stumbled across a frame in the finale of the series that contained a hidden YouTube link in the top left corner. When plugging this link into your browser, you will find a video that lays out all of the Prince pages in order, including the page that was ripped away from us at the end of the Nutrier commercial. This page leaves out a lot of information, but from what we can make out, the prince has returned to his kingdom. We can see him kneeling down, presumably before the king, his father, and we can also make out the Nutrier triangle hanging as a banner in the castle. The page reads, "One day, while the king was at long last, the prince, a new land with, and now, their king." So the prince has basically returned home, and is telling the king of this new land he found. What they will do when they get back is unknown. So knowing the full story is important, but what do these characters and events represent exactly? This has been a debate online for a while now, and I think that there are two theories surrounding this story that could work. The first is the most popular, being that the prince represents the Vita Carnis, or rather, the power that brings them to Earth, and the critters represent humanity, who stumbled upon the prince in the far gone past and awoke it on the island, which could represent Earth or the actual island in Hudson Bay. After the prince had awakened, he vowed to help humanity by bringing these creatures to Earth. He brought the crawl for food, the trimmings for comfort, and all the other species to mitigate human population. The only question I have with this theory is, why did the prince leave? If the origins of the Vita Carnis are solely to Earth, like the documentary said, then why would they need to leave to get them? It's possible that since this documentary was made by a bunch of students, it is untrustworthy, but it still bugs me. The second theory is that the critters actually represent the Vita Carnis. The prince, whoever or whatever he may be in this story, found the Vita Carnis in need of help and either brought them to Earth with him or brought humanity to Earth so that the Vita Carnis could thrive. I personally think that the critters most logically represent humanity, as in the last page it says that once the prince returns home, they will come back, not he will come back. And I'm pretty sure this means that the prince will return with the Vita Carnis to quote-unquote heal the island. I have also seen people say that the prince represents the singularity, but as we know there are actually 7 singularities, so this has to be incorrect. It's still a little hard to tell exactly what this story means. I mean, for all we know, the island that's being referred to in the story could actually be the island in Hudson Bay, but who knows at this point. I believe that we will get some more answers in Season 2. But now that we got that all cleared up, let's go ahead and launch into our actual timeline. The Vita Carnis were brought to Earth on a date that is unknown to us, but they actually started appearing in the 1930s. As people started to learn more and more about the Vita Carnis species, the world launched into a Second World War. Sometime either during or before this event, the Nutrier cult is formed, although they won't be known as Nutrier until 1990. In 1945, after the war had ended, a giant meat snake was found lodged in a tunnel by a cleanup crew. Its exact location is unknown, but we do know that it got to this size by being fed corpses of those who fell during the war. This meat snake appears to vanish completely, leaving scientists and the cleanup crew baffled. Imagine having to explain that one to your boss. 2 years later, another meat snake is found in 1947. Also underground in a railway tunnel, and also fed by the cult. We fast forward a few years and the monoliths appear on an island in Hudson Bay, Canada. This event takes place in 1972. We know that they are in Hudson Bay because of the red dot that appears there, the evidence on the board shown in the message video, and the actual footage of the carcass soldiers infiltrating the island, showing a monolith standing right beside them. There is something strange about this location though. You see, if you pull up an actual map of Canada, there is no island in Hudson Bay. It simply doesn't exist. So it begs the question, why is it here? I mean, how did it get there? Or did the monoliths erect it when they showed up in 1972? Another mystery that is unclear, but like I said, it could tie back to the Prince story with an island constantly being referred to. It seems to be some kind of special location, but the details of this location are unclear to us at this time. 7 monoliths appear in total, and for 5 years they just stand there and do nothing. The original documentary does say that there was some activity from them in a year that was censored from us. In the event, the monolith attacked a team of unknown people as they were making their way past it. It swung its appendages and killed them all. The military took action, first approaching the monolith with vehicles, which were also taken out swiftly when the monolith roared and sent out an EMP blast. Long-range missiles were then launched at the creature, but it recovered from each hit it took. After this, the area was fenced off and was restricted to all outsiders, either by the cult or the government, the CSIS, it's unclear at this time, and the monoliths have stood there ever since, doing nothing but waiting. A few years go by and the cult is gaining power over authorities and the government. We see this as we cut to 1980 and Vincent Barrar's father is slaughtered by a mimic in his trailer. His father, apparently a scientist, might have been researching the Vita Carnis, but we can't be sure. Vincent comes home to find his father brutalized, and he reports it to the police, who clear the scene and label it a suicide. In 1983, a pair of siblings go out to investigate the site of the killing, recording some kind of documentary-style video. On their way back to the house, both are attacked and killed by a mimic. This is, of course, Christopher and Janice. And it is at this point that I'm going to do my best to fill in some blanks, so be sure to take what I say with a few grains of salt, as I could be proven wrong down the road. I believe that during this time, the cult begins to realize that they can't hide events like this for much longer, and so they decide to start addressing them with defense videos and documentaries. One of the more notable ones is the Mimic Defense video that was broadcasted in 1986. The video seems to give good information, but we still don't quite know if it's reliable or not. Things like using a firearm or screaming and shouting could actually be bad for a person in this situation, and I wouldn't put it past the cult if they were actually trying to manipulate people into doing the wrong thing during an attack. It is a year later, in 1987, that the full Vita Carnis documentary is released by the NLMR. Soon after, it is confiscated by authorities, and many of the students who worked on it are arrested, although some managed to stay at large. The documentary featured hidden details that the authorities didn't want people to see, like the mimic attack, possibly some good instructions on how to deal with the creatures, and the many article clippings with cryptic subtext. When the students are questioned about the video, they say that they had no idea about the extra material. It was just supposed to be a fun project. This leads me to the conclusion that Vincent could have been working with these students on the documentary, as when we catch a glimpse of his wanted poster on the TV, we see a photograph taken in 1988, a year after the documentary was created and released. I believe he deliberately put these hidden details into that video himself, without the other students noticing, in order to try and get people talking, and more importantly, thinking about what is actually happening in the world around them. It also helps that it says he is wanted for interprovincial travel and the production of sensitive material. Vincent goes into hiding and begins gathering evidence to take down the cult and figure out what their plan is. While this is happening, I believe Carnis is founded, a private organization that researches the Vita Carnis for purposes that are unknown. If I had to guess, it is probably to find the weaknesses of each species, because as we can see in the final video of the series, they are very well equipped to deal with these creatures, neutralizing a harvester in the Season 1 finale. They begin to receive backlash from government agencies for doing such research. Vincent catches wind of this in an article seen on his evidence wall, and he begins to make a plan. Moving into 1989, anomalies are being observed with the Carnis species, mainly the harvesters. They begin moving up north to Hudson Bay between the months of August, September, and October. The video that gives us this information also shows us some horrific imagery of a mother and a child that were killed by a harvester. The way this video is laid out is meant to make us think that this event took place as the harvesters were moving up north, but I don't think that is the case, and I will explain why. Now, everything I am about to say is not confirmed, so huge grain of salt with this, okay? I have had 2 theories regarding this family while writing this video, and I have even said before in this video that the father in the photo holds some resemblance to Vincent, and I originally thought that it might have been him. Doing the quick math, assuming that Vincent was, 17 at the time of his father's death in 1980, and he became wanted in 1988, that would make him 25 years old. It's not too far-fetched to think that within that time he could have started a family and then 2 of its members got killed, but there is a wrench thrown into this theory as well. 1 child is still alive in the photo. So is Vincent hiding his kid while he's gathering evidence? It just doesn't make sense to me. Then a thought occurred to me. What if Vincent isn't the father, but what if he's the child, the one who didn't get killed? This makes much more sense. After he loses his mother and brother, his father takes him to a remote location where he begins studying the Vita Carnis. As we know, he is later killed by a mimic, and I would assume the research he was working on is left to Vincent. It is easy to see why Vincent is so dedicated to taking down the cult and the Vita Carnis. It's because they took everything from him. His mother, his father, his brother are all gone because no one is doing anything to stop the evil that is spreading throughout the world. Like I said, I could be wrong, but it makes sense to me. And I think that this is the best theory that I could come up with for who these people actually were. We hit 1990, and the cult starts to make some big moves. Disguising themselves as a nutrition company, they create the Flavor Enhancer, going through a massive marketing campaign to advertise this new brainwashing seasoning. It works. The Flavor Enhancer flies off the shelves and into the hands of thousands and possibly millions of people. The seasoning contains some kind of spore that can presumably control a person, much like cordyceps, for a purpose that is still unknown to us at this time. On December 30th, Vincent reaches out to Carnis with a video message that includes all of the evidence he has gathered against Nutrier, and he gives them information about a meeting that will be taking place on the Mystery Island in Hudson Bay. Sometime after receiving this message, Carnis begins an operation to infiltrate the meeting. During this video, we learn that Nutrier has been gathering 7 singularities for this meeting to begin a mysterious second phase in their overall operation. In a tense stealth operation, Carnis manages to send in a team of soldiers that make it past the monolith, guarding the entrance to the facility, and they successfully infiltrate the meeting. In the final few frames, we see the meeting itself. Cult members are gathered around 7 singularities. The video breaks. We hear gunfire and screams. And this is where our story comes to an end for the time being. There are still questions that need to be answered, and the ending of this season is actually decently ambiguous. Was the operation successful? What's the purpose of the singularities? Did the team get attacked? In the Season 2 trailer for the series, we get a message at the very end that says the mission was successful. But if I've learned anything from analog horror, it's that you can never be too sure about anything. As far as the singularities go, I believe that they are in some way tied to the monoliths, for the sole fact that there are 7 monoliths and 7 singularities. I believe that the monoliths and the singularities will bond at some point. Maybe the singularities will go into the heads of the monoliths and bring about some kind of calamity. I don't know. As far as the overall plan and purpose for each Carnis species, it's still tough to say. One thing is for sure though, humanity is probably going to be very close to extinction by the time this series finishes. And speaking of finishing things off, I think it is time that I end this video, as I have run out of creepy stuff to talk about. Whew, okay, well, that was a video that took longer than expected. This part of the video is unscripted, and I just wanted to say thank you for being so patient with me as I work on these longer videos. They always take longer than I expect them to, but I really just kind of grinded on this one, and I think it turned out pretty good. Feel free to let me know how you felt about it. Did you enjoy it? Was there any criticisms you've had? Do you hate me as a person? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you have any topics that you would like me to cover, whether it be analog horror, true crime, or anything like that, feel free to hit me up in the comments below. I will read them, and I will see what I can do. Alright, that's it guys. Thanks for watching this video. Take care. Bye-bye.